I would also like to include our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, into this discussion. There was a lot of emphasis given on the wars which are currently taking place, the war in Ukraine and the current Israel-Hamas war. Susan, this clash and this historic debate also arrives at a moment of profound polarization and, if we can say, deep-seated anxiety among American voters about the state of American politics. Do you think that the debate today managed to have the kind of impact that both the contenders were hoping for, and how perhaps could it change the trajectory of 2024 campaign?
I think that's too early to tell, but from what we saw online and the polling and these focus groups with undecided voters, a lot of the voters that voted for President Biden in 2020 were not sure that they would vote again for him in 2024. And again, as Mark noted, and we talked about this, while there were some policy issues and nuggets that President Biden tried to bring home and hammer home, the problem was his delivery. And he just could not keep up with the former president. And for those reasons, I'm not sure whether or not, some undecided voters at this point would have been swayed in one way or the other. I think everyone is going to be where they are. But the Biden camp, I think, may be a little bit concerned because of his performance. I mean, this is a president that, his campaign put out the statements about how he's getting prepared at Camp David. For 5 days, he was hunkered down there. And then, his voice, they had to come out and say he has the flu. So, there were a lot of issues with those optics. And, while we constantly want to focus on policy, and the American people really deserve that, you just cannot underestimate what we just watched on TV. There was a stark contrast between the two men. But again, whether or not this debate will move the needle or not, well, we'll have to wait and see.
Right, Susan, I have to mention here that Biden's age is also one of the major concerns for all the American voters, with 60% Americans concerned over Biden's age. With that being said, do you have any questions for our guest, Mr. Mark Meadowitz?
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that, Mark touched upon the fact that President Biden seemed to be over-prepared. I'd love to get his views on whether or not he thinks that the undecided voters were swayed in one way or the other watching this debate, and whether or not you think viewers are weary of these, even CNN debunked the issue that President Trump at one point said there are fine people on both sides. Do you think the voters are just tired of hearing these jargons that a lot of them are not true? And do you think they were swayed in any way after tonight's debate?
I think you make an excellent point about that. And I think that it's really hard to tell. I mean, swaying. Look, Trump, I think, made a misstep because I think he was just going to his base. He was just repeating all the things he says at the rallies. And he hurled them at Biden. You're the worst president in history. And Biden says, Trump, you're the worst because the presidential scholars say so. And this is just the stuff that Trump says at the rallies. So, and Biden, as you correctly point out, was many cases not very effective in parrying back against Trump. So, the base, he wants to solidify his base. I think Trump made a big mistake. He should have tried to show more that he is the president of all the people rather than solidifying all these points that we've heard 100 times before. I do think on a few points, Biden did show that he was presidential on the point about the veterans and other things that he said. I think he skirted the idea that I never heard anyone running for president or president speaking about retribution. I never heard your comments about veterans. I mean, I love the veterans and things like that Biden has been very strong on. I remember years ago, I heard a talk that Biden had given about visiting veterans in a veterans hospital. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, no question. There's something that, his feeling for veterans is very realistic, very sincere, but it didn't come through, as you pointed out. And, again, interesting that you say that he had a cold or the flu. It was very clear that his voice was not effective, and that Trump had a full voice. But But again, Trump was rehashing all these things that he says all the time. And Biden, I think, missed the boat by not being presidential enough. As far as the
Right, Mr.
undecided
Meadows.
voters, I do agree with you that, it's really very hard to know that they're going to move the needle one way or the other because, truth of the matter is that, they just said a lot of things that they always say. And, Biden, I don't think completely failed here. I mean, he made some interesting points. Trump, I think the very pivotal point was on January 6th and whether he would accept the election results.
Right.
That was very, very, very important.
Right, Mr. Merowitz, I just also wanted to add a point here that Biden seemed to lose his train of thought when the debate was going on, when he first referred to billionaires as trillionaires before correcting himself. With that being said, my last question to you, Susan, we have to talk about the new rules with no live audience and mute button. How do you think, perhaps a very structured way of debate that we witnessed today, how do you think that panned out?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was garnering a lot of criticism in the beginning, but I think viewers appreciated, first of all, the moderators did a great job in not being biased towards one candidate or the other. They really deserve praise for that. And the microphone situation, the muting situation seemed to have worked. I mean, Donald Trump was definitely a lot more measured than he regularly was. I did see that President Biden wanted to jump in once or twice. I think the moderators gave them that advantage. The one thing that was a cause for concern, and this is, free speech, the freedom of the media, was that a few hours before the debate started, CNN announced that there won't be any reporters besides CNN reporters during the debate because they were concerned for perhaps a medical incident regarding one of the candidates. So that's something that the White House Correspondents Association took notice of. They wrote a statement about it. That may be something that will be talked about in some media outlets on how we really didn't get to see more behind the scenes, recollections and color than what we saw that was very clear cut and measured, so to say, on CNN. So I think that was something that was out of the ordinary. We usually have live audiences, people cheer, they boo. We didn't get that. But perhaps that was a good thing for these two men.
Right. Susan and Mr. Merowitz, thank you so much for joining us on the show with your insights on the historic presidential debate in the United States of America.